Welcome to Mafia True Crime Stories, where every silence hides a secret. Here, we don't glorify crime, we unmask it. Each episode takes you deep into the minds of real gangsters, men who built empires on loyalty, fear, and fate, and lost it all the same way. From quiet dons to ruthless street legends, every story here is told with truth, tension, and the calm before the gunshot. So pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, and let's step back into the world where every whisper could be your last. It was said he never slept, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't trust anyone long enough to close his eyes. In the gritty underworld of the Gambino family, Billy Batts was known as a man who carried an air of mystery. No one really knew where he came from, or how he'd made his rise, but they all knew one thing: he had a way of making things happen. Billy sat quietly in the back booth of a dimly lit bar, his eyes scanning the room, but his mind was a million miles away. He had just been released from prison after serving 6 long years, and the world outside had changed. But Billy had no time for nostalgia. He had lost his grip, and he was eager to regain it. A made man in the Gambino family, Billy thought he could simply pick up where he left off. He wasn't prepared for the sharks circling. Billy had always lived by a rule: trust no one, keep your distance. But in a world so deeply rooted in betrayal and loyalty, even the hardest men could crack. He didn't trust anyone, but not even he could outrun the ghosts of his past. But Billy didn't know it yet. There was someone watching him from the shadows, someone who would soon change everything. Billy Batts wasn't always the feared man he was now. Born in Brooklyn, he grew up surrounded by the gritty pulse of the streets. As a young man, he was full of ambition. One look at the power the mobsters wielded, and he wanted in. He saw the way men like Gotti held the streets in their hands, how respect was the currency that ruled their world. Billy didn't just want to be a part of it, he wanted to command it. At the bar that night, as he sipped his drink, the past seemed so far away. But it wasn't. Those streets had shaped him, and that power had given him a taste of what it felt like to be untouchable. The Gambino family had made him who he was, and he wore it like a badge. But power had a price, one that Billy would soon learn. Loyalty wasn't something that was given, it was earned through fear, respect, and sometimes, betrayal. The men he surrounded himself with weren't just family, they were brothers in a world where weakness meant death. Yet, even Billy couldn't escape the pull of the streets. His every move was watched, every word weighed. The loyalty he had spent years building was fragile. And the truth? Loyalty in the mob was only as strong as the men who believed in it. But he didn't know yet that his own faith in the rules would be his undoing. Billy wasn't just a soldier in the Gambino family, he was a rising star. His connection to the big players, like Gotti and Carmine Fatico, had earned him a seat at the table. The world of organized crime, with all its luxury and danger, was within reach. He could taste the power, feel the respect. The hustle had always been in his blood, but now it was more than that, it was his future. He had everything to gain and nothing to lose. Billy started to take bigger risks. A few loan sharking jobs, a little muscle here and there, nothing too big, nothing too flashy. But behind the scenes, he was making moves, building a network. His reputation was growing, and with it, the stakes. Yet, even as he gained influence, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath him was shifting. There were whispers in the streets, murmurs of things changing. The game was never static. New faces, new power players, it wasn't the same world it once was. But Billy didn't think much of it. He'd seen it all before, the men who rose too fast, and the men who didn't rise at all. He was confident in his place, sure of his power. The new blood? They didn't scare him. It was only when he walked into that bar that night, eyes locked with Tommy DeSimone, that he realized just how fragile his world had become. He wasn't just up against the game anymore, he was up against the people he trusted most. And Tommy? He wasn't just a friend anymore. He was the threat Billy didn't see coming. Billy had always prided himself on his ability to command respect. In the world he moved in, it was the only currency that mattered. He'd built his reputation over years, with careful precision. When he spoke, People listened, whether they liked it or not. It wasn't just about fear, it was about control. And control meant power. Power meant survival. In the game he played, it was the only thing that kept you alive. For years, he'd walked with that confidence. When he entered a room, it was as if the air shifted. He had the respect of the old guard and the ambition of the young blood. Men like him didn't get questioned. He had the right to demand loyalty, to make decisions that others were too scared to make. But that night, in the dimly lit bar, as he glanced around at the familiar faces, something was off. The silence that followed his arrival wasn't the usual kind of silence, it was the kind that hinted at things unsaid. Tommy DeSimone's stare was colder than he remembered. Jimmy Burke's laugh didn't ring as true. The undercurrents of their conversations, the fleeting glances, they weren't about camaraderie anymore. Something was shifting. The world Billy had once controlled was now slipping from his fingers, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Billy didn't realize it yet, but the rules of his world were no longer being written by him. The loyalty that had been the foundation of his power was starting to fracture. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe it wasn't just the streets that were changing, maybe it was the men around him. Maybe the rules they once followed, the loyalty they once held dear, didn't apply to him anymore. But before he could think on it too much, Tommy spoke, and in that moment, Billy knew he was no longer the man in control. The tension between Billy and Tommy had been building, unspoken but palpable, like a storm brewing just on the horizon. Billy had known Tommy for years, seen him as a younger guy full of potential but always a little too wild. He never thought much of it. Tommy was brash, sure, but he had earned his place in the crew, and that counted for something. But on that night, something in Tommy's eyes changed. The playful banter they'd once shared felt sharp now, like it had teeth. It started with a simple question. Billy, half joking, asked if Tommy still shined shoes. The words were thrown out without a second thought, a dig, a tease. But to Tommy, it was more than that. Billy didn't see the storm forming, but Tommy did. It wasn't about the shoes. It was about respect. Billy had made a joke about Tommy's past, about his humble beginnings. And for Tommy, that was an insult he couldn't let go. Billy leaned back in his chair, laughing at his own words, not noticing the way Tommy's face tightened. He had no idea that in that moment, he was crossing a line he didn't even know existed. Tommy's temper had always been a ticking time bomb, but this was different. This wasn't just anger, it was something deeper. Something personal. The quiet that followed was heavy. Jimmy noticed it first, his eyes flicking nervously between the two men. He knew that Tommy wasn't the type to forget a slight, especially one that dug at his pride. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, but Billy, still oblivious, reached for his drink, as if nothing had changed. But something had. Billy didn't know it yet, but the game was shifting. And the very men he thought he could trust were now the ones who would bury him. The loyalty he had built wasn't worth the paper it was written on, and that night, it was about to be tested in the worst way possible. The night dragged on, the chatter and clinking glasses barely cutting through the thick silence that had settled over the group. Billy, still unaware of the storm he'd set off, continued to drink and joke, trying to push past the tension he hadn't even fully understood. But Tommy? He was seething. His jaw clenched with each laugh Billy made, each joke that seemed to erase everything Tommy had fought for. The small comment about shoes had dug deeper than anyone realized. For Tommy, it wasn't just a joke. It was a reminder of his past, a reminder that no matter how much power he'd gained, some people still saw him as that kid who had nothing. Billy's eyes met Tommy's again, this time a little less certain. He saw it now, something was off. But it was too late. Tommy's patience had run out, and the rage that simmered beneath the surface for so long was about to explode. "Tommy, you still shine shoes?" Billy laughed again, but the words sounded hollow now, forced. Tommy's gaze didn't shift, he didn't smile. His voice was low, steady, but Billy heard the threat in it. "Shut your mouth, Billy," Tommy muttered, his fingers twitching, the tension in his body telling Billy everything he needed to know. But the joke had already been made. the damage was done. It wasn't just a matter of words anymore. It was about pride, and Tommy's pride had been wounded. The weight of that night hung in the air like an unspoken ultimatum. Billy had crossed a line, one he didn't even know was there. But Tommy did. Billy didn't know it, but he had just made a fatal mistake. The clock was ticking. The tension between the two men was reaching its breaking point, and before long, one of them would have to pay the price. What Billy didn't know was that Tommy was already calculating his next move, and Billy was about to become the sacrifice. 2 weeks passed, but the tension Billy felt never lifted. It lingered in the pit of his stomach, a gnawing discomfort that wouldn't let go. He tried to shake it off, getting back into the business, reclaiming his old rackets, just like he had planned. But the world around him had changed. His old friends, the men he thought he could trust, seemed distant, distracted. They weren't the same. Neither was he. Billy found himself at the Suite, the nightclub he used to frequent. It was late, most of the usual crowd had already gone home. But there he was, sitting at the bar, the faint glow of the neon lights casting long shadows. He could feel the eyes on him. He knew something was off, but he didn't want to believe it. Not yet. He thought maybe it was just the stress of adjusting back to life on the outside. But deep down, he knew. Something was coming. Then Tommy walked in. Billy's stomach tightened. He knew that look, cold, calculating. Tommy's gaze flicked over to him, and for a moment, the room seemed to disappear. Billy knew. He could feel it in the air. Tommy had come for him. There was no escape. Tommy wasted no time. He quickly sent his girlfriend away, his eyes never leaving Billy. The tension between them was unbearable. Jimmy Burke, ever the opportunist, joined them at the bar, trying to play the peacemaker, buying drinks, trying to smooth things over. But Billy saw through it. Jimmy wasn't trying to calm things down, he was setting him up. Tommy's plan was already in motion. Billy's heart pounded, but he didn't show it. He couldn't. The game wasn't over yet. But Billy had one thing he could count on, the rules of the game. He was a made man, untouchable by the laws of the streets. Tommy wouldn't dare cross that line. At least, that's what he thought. What Billy didn't know was that in the world he had lived and died by, there were no rules left. The mob didn't care about loyalty. And as Tommy reached for the bag and pulled out the .38, Billy understood, too late, that he had lost. The gunshot shattered the silence of the bar. Billy's body jerked violently, his head snapping back as Tommy's hand, steady and precise, pulled the trigger. The room froze for a split second, the world outside the bar ceasing to exist. The noise of the bullet was drowned by the rising pressure in Billy's chest, the cold realization that his time had come. He couldn't move. His body was still, almost paralyzed. Billy's eyes widened, locked on Tommy as the gun in his hand glinted under the harsh bar lights. His breath came shallow, uneven, as if his entire life was flashing before him in that one painful moment. He didn't scream. He didn't cry out for help. Billy had always lived by the code. Men like him didn't show weakness, not in front of anyone. But inside, everything was falling apart. Tommy's voice broke through the haze, a cold, harsh command. "Shine these, expletive, shoes," he spat, as he struck Billy again with the gun. The blood seeped from the side of Billy's head, dark and thick. His vision blurred, the edges of the world darkening. There was no fight left in him, not now. But his mind raced with one final thought: how had it come to this? The room was silent again, save for the faint sound of Jimmy's nervous breathing as he tightened his arm around Billy's neck, holding him in place. The other men watched, unable or unwilling to intervene. Billy, for all his power, was nothing more than a casualty of his own world now. It wasn't supposed to end this way, not for him, not in this bar, with a bullet in his skull and no one around to save him. The irony of it hit him hard. Tommy, the same boy he had once laughed with, had now turned into the very thing Billy had always feared, the unpredictable chaos of the streets, ready to take everything without a second thought. But even as his body lay there, lifeless on the cold floor, one question echoed in Billy's mind: Who was next? The silence stretched on, but it wouldn't last forever. Not in the world they lived in. Billy's body was still warm when they moved him. Tommy's face was a mask of cold rage, the tension in his shoulders betraying the effort it took to keep his hands steady. He looked down at Billy, but there was no remorse in his eyes, only the hard resolve of a man who had done what he believed was necessary. The unspoken rule of the Mafia: when you kill a made man without permission, you clean up the mess. The room emptied quickly after the deed was done. The usual suspects, Jimmy, Henry, the crew, disappeared into the shadows, each man knowing the gravity of what had just occurred. Billy Batts, the man who had once been untouchable, now lay in a pool of his own blood. Jimmy, still jittery from the chaos, whispered, "We need to get rid of him. Now." Tommy nodded, his gaze cold, but his mind already racing with the next steps. It wasn't just the body they had to worry about, it was the consequences. The Gambino family couldn't know. Not yet. Not until the heat died down. They dragged Billy's lifeless form to the trunk of a car, wrapped him in a blanket, and drove out to a secluded spot. The air was sharp, biting at their skin as they worked in silence. The ground was frozen, a thin layer of snow dusting everything around them, but the men didn't stop. They needed to bury Billy before anyone found him. The thought of his body being discovered by the wrong person was too much to bear. Tommy didn't speak. He was still in that strange, quiet fury. But as they dug into the frozen earth, the weight of what had happened settled deeper in his gut. He had killed a man, a friend, a member of the family. And yet, there was no turning back now. They buried Billy deep, burying more than just a body. They buried a friendship, buried loyalty, buried any hope of redemption in the streets they once ruled. As Tommy, Jimmy, and Henry stood over the grave, they didn't speak. The silence was heavier than any words could be. In that silence, it wouldn't last long. The ripple effect of Billy's death was just beginning. The Mafia world had a way of turning things over, making sure that every action, every betrayal, would eventually be paid for. Years passed, but the echoes of Billy Batts' death never truly faded. The Mafia world had a way of moving on, shifting, adapting, as though nothing ever really happened. But Tommy, Jimmy, and Henry couldn't escape what they had done. The weight of Billy's blood stained their hands, and no matter how far they ran, the past had a way of catching up with them. For Tommy, it wasn't just the regret. It was the sense of being trapped, the way the streets he had once controlled now felt like a cage. His name had been whispered in fear, but it wasn't the kind of power he had craved. It was a hollow victory, a victory that came at the cost of his own humanity. The irony was painful. Tommy DeSimone, the feared and respected hitman, now an outcast, his life ending as violently as the one he had built. He died without ever knowing the full consequences of his actions, his body disappearing just as quickly as it had lived. Jimmy Burke, too, was left with his own demons. He would go on to make millions in the infamous Lufthansa heist, but nothing could wash away the shame of what he had done to Billy. He would die in prison, a broken man, his life defined by his own greed and violence. The world had moved on, but Jimmy was stuck in the past, forever haunted by the friends he had betrayed, and the man they had killed. And Henry Hill? He would live out the rest of his life in witness protection, forever looking over his shoulder, forever carrying the weight of his past. He would write about it, tell the world the secrets of the Mafia, but even as the story was told, he knew the truth. There was no escaping what they had done. It was a part of them, forever. Billy Batts was gone, but his story, his death, lived on in the shadows of every man who was ever part of that world. They all carried it, the price of betrayal, the cost of loyalty, and the brutal lesson they learned too late. He outlived the world he built, not because he was lucky, but because he never broke his word. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gangster stories like this one.